have helped in the background since 2017, and this is the first time I've been able to successfully ride my way onto this stage. So I would just like to encourage everyone, if you haven't been up here yet, don't worry. Maybe in 10 years.
If you have a dream.
Just first, can everyone hear me okay? We good? All right. A couple other housekeeping things. Some of you might already know this about me, but I love a short talk. If my goal tonight was to teach you everything that I could about the topics within homesteading, I think I'd be setting all of us up for failure. And so I'll tell you at the outset, I'll be up here 20-ish minutes. It'll be shorter than our 30-second soapbox. So I'll be in like true monologue form up here for about that much time, but I'm happy to stay up and do Q&A and dive deep into like homesteading skills for as long as people have interest. And then I would just also invite you, if you don't want to talk about the specifics of your situation or what your barriers are, like find me on Telegram, find me on Twitter. I'm Autonomous Kiara on both. And I'd be happy to chat with you privately as well. So with that in mind too, please save questions until the end. Josh will walk around with mics, we'll get your lovely voices on the recording, and then it won't look like I'm up here talking to myself answering questions. Okay, so homesteading at any scale, but particularly why starting small can be a really big advantage. Okay, so this presentation was prompted by one major thing. People ask me questions like, how are you? What have you been up to? And I share something that I'm doing, so you try to be like authentic and genuine and not just say, I'm good, and share something that I'm doing and I hear, oh, that's really neat, and a lot of genuine interest and response, but always an objection to follow about why they can't do any of the things I'm doing, whether it's, you know, sprouting some plants in my basement, or getting chickens, or, you know, cooking something from scratch. So I wanted to address that if your objection is land, time, space, energy, money, all of those things, then they're not an actual objection, and we're gonna work through that today. And then the other thing is just to, maybe I do wanna hold the mic. Josh, I lied to you, I'm sorry, I did it again. Introducing a new framework for how you think about homesteading and skill acquisition as well, just new ways to think about it. So, one of the major problems that I encounter when talking about homesteading is, when I say homesteading, you think this. You think livestock, maybe multiple types of livestock. A area of your garden that you can allow to lay fallow in a season. Tons and tons of plantings. Maybe an orchard. And this is a great goal. I'm not trying to like shit on anyone who has like this in mind when I say homesteading. But when I say homesteading, I mean this. I mean home cooked food. I mean vegetables that maybe you grew, maybe you got from a farmer's market or another trusted source, a neighbor. Maybe it's a greenhouse. It's finding small areas on your property where you can grow something. It's making things that maybe were vitamins from scratch, like anti-inflammation gummies out of turmeric, or putting up food when you have more basil than you need that week, trying to put some of it away for next time. Chickens, these are my girls. Maybe you really love burning a good sage wand, and sage is so easy to grow. Do it, try it. Do it inside if you need to. Growing seedlings, making bone broth. So really what I'm trying to emphasize here is that 5, 10, 20 acres, of course, like if you really want to be a big homesteader, that should be on your radar. Maybe you're aspiring to that one day. But homesteading is a verb. It is something that you're doing all the time. It's a journey. It is not the destination. And those actions and skills, those things, those pictures that I showed, which are all things from our home, from our lives in the last couple years, they don't happen overnight. If I was to tell each one of you today, congratulations, I'm Oprah, you each have 10 perfect acres, what would you be able to do with them if you haven't started the skills today? Okay, so let's take a step back here and define our terms, beginning of every good talk. So the traditional definition, the act or practice of acquiring, settling on, or occupying land under a homestead law. In other words, as provided by the Federal Homestead Act of 1862, an area of public land in the West, usually 160 acres, granted to any U.S. citizen willing to settle on and farm the land for at least 5 years. Unfortunately, this is no longer true. It has since expired. And I added this at the end. I went and looked it up. And of course, pay the government $1.25 per acre of that land. Homesteading, with the ing at the end, was first used 5 years later, 1867, in a book. And it referred to those people who were using this law to acquire land. Okay, the modern definition. A lifestyle of self-sufficiency. It is characterized by subsistence agriculture, home preservation of food, may also involve the small-scale production of textiles, clothing, craft work, for household use or for sale. And in other words, because we always need at least 2 sources for every definition here, the act or practice of living frugally or self-sufficiently as on a homestead, especially by growing and preserving food. So those definitions are useful. They're also exceptionally broad. A lot of things can be homesteading, and most importantly, I think that definition actually provides a huge barrier to entry for a lot of people. So it's really hard to get started on such a broad and lofty goal. And I think a lot of people who now will call themselves homesteaders didn't really realize that this is where they were headed. They look up years down the road and they're like, oh, okay, now I'm a homesteader, now I'm homesteading. And so my advice to anyone who's interested in homesteading, or maybe is already a homesteader, but you've hesitated to call yourself that, is to embrace the constraints in your life. The things that prevent you from adopting that label. And the first thing I think we all need to embrace, all need to do in order to embrace those constraints, is to throw out that first picture. To understand that like that is one idea of a homestead, but to have a homestead, to be homesteading, to be a homesteader does not have to look like that first picture. So I'm here, if you walk away with one thing, I want you to walk away with like 10 things. But one of the things that I wish you would walk away with is the idea that your homestead can absolutely be a place that you rent. You can be a homesteader in an apartment. And I lost my spot. And your version of homesteading might mean that you never aspire to owning 5 acres or even 1 acre. So I think it's also worth mentioning that in any niche space, that there will always be gatekeepers to labels. And so when we encounter them, I think it's really important to remember that there's a theme in our society that the people who bitch the most are often doing the least. And if you tell any fellow homesteader that the things that you're doing to develop your homesteading skills and you're working on those, and they criticize you because you're doing it in an apartment or in a community garden, and it's not on acreage that you own outright, that those people probably aren't worth your time. That you should definitely be open about the stage that you're at. Don't lie to people, don't mislead people as far as like what you are doing, but you're still a homesteader, you're still homesteading. And those people who are on that traditional homestead that have 5 acres, 10 acres, and they have a dairy cow and they have no off-prem jobs, like that's awesome, brag about it, I want to hear about it. But the fact that someone else is homesteading in an apartment does not make you less. The fact that they call themselves that does not make the fact that you are doing it on 10 acres any lesser. It means that they're aspiring to something that you're doing, and we should really be better in this world about finding allies to our goals, not tearing down people. So, all that in mind, and because that definition is so broad, I would highly encourage you to add goals to your idea of homesteading, and having those goals is going to illuminate the areas of homesteading you are actually interested in and able to do, and it narrows down your focus and helps you understand where to put in the work. So I'm going to get very personal with mine, talk about my goals and my constraints and what that means for homesteading in my life. I use this as an illustration tool to show what I mean and how you can apply these concepts. So my goals here are not in any particular order. It's also worth mentioning that if you have someone else who lives in your household, you should probably take their goals into account, even if you're like the person who's a little bit more into it. And so I have some tangible things on my list here, but I also have some pretty cheesy ones. So be increasingly self-sufficient and decentralized, eat quality food, learn new skills, improve my health, which often means to move more, to be present and meditative, to reduce my stress, to enjoy my time while being productive, which is something that's really important in my life. Like I want to have fun, I want to do all the things, but I also want to feel like I did it at the end of the day. To cultivate seasonality, to be outside more, to be resilient, and to participate in something that is resilient. To eat food I can't find at the store reliably, so this is pretty much chive blossoms all of June, just me stuffing my face. I start to turn purple. And then contributing to local seed diversity. So yours might be a little different. It might be fuck the state, goats are cute, eat homegrown tomatoes, and reduce waste. And then we have our constraints. So my constraints, we are on 0.23 acres. That is not a typo. 0.23. Government zoning rules, at least the ones I can't ignore. I have to work for the most part, currently not working. If anyone's hiring, hi. Money is always going to be a constraint. Even if it was a non-issue in our lives, it would still be a budget item. I like to travel on occasion. Our lot has lots of shade, we have a lot of trees. The resale value of our home, there's a good chance we won't live in the home that we're in forever, and I would really like to be able to sell it for a reasonable amount when it's done and not have someone be like, you didn't maintain this and there's raised garden beds everywhere and I want a lawn. They're not gonna get a lawn. Squirrel tax, so we have pine trees in our yard, so we have squirrels. If one of my goals was I want to have a sunflower farm, I would have to plant twice the number that I would need because 50% of that would go to the squirrels. I really, really hate turning and watering compost piles, so the misery tolerance for me on that is about 2 times a year. That's about all I'm gonna do it, so that's definitely a constraint in my life. And then we have winter here, which I do love, but it limits gardening. So your constraints might be that you live in an apartment with no balcony. You can still be a homesteader, you can still homestead. Time and anything else. So combine those goals with those constraints and hopefully you've gained some focus. So the things that I know that I have in my life to focus on because of my goals and my constraints: high density gardening. I don't have unlimited space. Slow pile composting. So my compost might take 2 years, but I didn't have to flip it more than once or twice. Loamy composting inside. So buying something that's like a machine that will allow you to compost in a day for a very small amount. It costs money, but it allows me to get compost more quickly. Chickens, because I apparently can't have a whole herd of cows in my 0.23 acres, the government says. Seed saving, in the off season, spending time on permaculture design, and then for money, like what money can I make on my homestead to offset my costs? So yours, based on those hypothetical goals, hypothetical constraints, might be aquaponic tomatoes. Maybe you think aquaponics are really cool, you want to try that. Bribing neighbors with tomatoes and preserving them. Getting a loamy composter as well. This is not a paid loamy composter promotion, but find some place to volunteer with goats, or maybe you want to spend a lot of time watching goat yoga videos because you really want that Q factor, you want to learn more about them and what they like. So those might be some things that you can do. Okay, and now the project management portion of my presentation. So, to put it what I'm driving at in a completely different way, I want to introduce a couple concepts that you might have heard of if you're in a startup world and in tech, but you probably have not really applied to the context of homesteading. So these concepts are MVP, minimum viable product, and the idea of the triple constraint. So minimum viable product is a strategy popular in lean startups. It involves creating a simplified version of a product or project with only the essential features to quickly bring it to market. The goal is to gather feedback, iterate based on real-world usage, and allow for continuous improvement and avoiding unnecessary development of features that may not be valuable. So we can apply this concept to homesteading. It means starting your homesteading journey and the individual projects within that journey with a manageable scope, and gradually expanding and refining your efforts based on your real-world experience. So having an iterative or incremental approach to homesteading can make it easier to adapt and grow with your goals over time, and it's also in alignment with your skills as you build them. I'd also just add here that homesteading is a pretty heavily romanticized topic in social media, and Using this kind of iterative approach allows you to abandon the aspects that don't ultimately fit your goals. You might think that like owning goats is really cool, they're really cute, but you get around goats and you don't realize you're gonna headbutt all the time. You don't really like that. And so the list of activities and skills within that scope of homesteading is so extensive that unless you have unlimited time and money and resources, you're unlikely to do them all anyway. Limit yourself to an MVP and iterate from there about what you like and what you actually find useful. So, triple constraint. The triple constraint, also known as the project management triangle or the iron triangle, refers to the interdependence of 3 key project elements: scope, time, and cost. Any change to one of these elements is going to impact the other 2, so highlighting the need for balance and trade-offs. Said another way, when you increase the scope, you must also increase the scheduled time or the budgeted resources devoted to that project. So I think that applying this concept to homesteading is even more probably straightforward than MVP. If the scope of your homesteading goals are substantial and you have a high time preference, you're going to need a big budget. Recognizing the interdependence of the 3 elements is vital to your success homesteading. So you can limit your scope significantly so that you don't fail under the burden of time and budget constraints. If you have tons of budget and you have no time, you can outsource those projects so that you can maintain your scope while limiting your time commitment. If you have plenty of time or a low time preference and you have very limited funds, you can operate on a much tighter budget and maintain your scope and so on. So I don't often see these concepts applied explicitly. I think they're often really implied when we talk about homesteading projects. But I think calling them out while you're like drafting goals is going to be vital to engaging those parts of your brain that are creatively problem solving and not just falling into the steps of others. You can apply a lot of concepts creatively, and that you can absolutely homestead. This means that, like, maybe homesteading for you just means a very limited scope, or a lot of money and a big scope still. Okay. Water. While we look at all these. Okay, now that I've said scope a million times, let's spend the last couple minutes here doing an overview of skills, because I have a feeling most of you guys had a expectation of a talk on homesteading skills and instead got a project management talk. So here's a list of skills I pulled together. I think that in just a few minutes, if we all together tried to come up with more skills, we could easily double this list. So that's to say it's very far from exhaustive. Many of the subjects and skills on this list would require years of extensive knowledge and extensive study to be proficient in. And so if you aspire to have a homestead where a significant amount of your needs are met on the homestead, I would encourage you to dabble in as many of these as you have interest in, and to shrug off the urge to wait until you've met some prerequisite that you deem necessary. Limitations, whether it is land, money, time, they're valuable to you even while they are restricting. Focus is useful. If like I said at the beginning, like if I told you to go out, learn all these things, I've got 10 acres for you, beautiful land, perfect for homesteading, probably not in Colorado, then the learning curve would be absolutely brutal. Focus on what makes you efficient, and I'm not saying don't strive for that perfect homesteading property. I know I am, and when in those moments when I'm sitting there making my plan for the next season and thinking, man, I wish I just had one more raised bed in full sun, and I have that thought every season, just one more bed. And those of you who've seen our home, I've tucked them in everywhere I can. In those moments, I have to shift my mindset. I have to remind myself that I can be better at interplanting strategies. I can use succession planting tools better. I can learn more about vertical growing techniques, and I can learn more about optimizing soil health. And I know that those lessons will absolutely serve me better right now, and I don't have to wait. And they're also going to serve me better when we have 10 acres and I can feed all of you instead of just me and Josh. So I'm gonna come back to this slide in just a second, but I actually just wanna put my conclusion here. And so to restate this really concisely, like I said, I think I didn't hit the the timer, but we're probably about 20 minutes. So understand your goals and what successful homesteading means for you and your household. Scope your MVP homestead to those goals with an understanding of the constraints that you have currently and those you might have in the future. And then remember that constraints are useful. I just had one more closing note that I couldn't fit in elegantly. And if one of your constraints on here is government, I've got to have the even more liberty angle, right? Consider what is the penalty for that infraction and not just if it is an infraction. Joel Salatin is one of my favorite resources he's truly a farmer. He runs a farm called Polyface Farms, but he's also a homesteader in a significant way. And he wanted to sell meat birds off of his property. So he realized that in order to do so and to sell those birds slaughtered, butchered, how his customers like them, right? Customers want to buy a plucked chicken. He would need to have a USDA inspected facility, an abattoir on his property. And that is, we're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that was certainly not worth the cost to sell a few meat birds. So he looked into it. Okay, what's the penalty? Is he gonna go to jail if he sells those meat birds anyway? No, not gonna go to jail. Might he get fined? Yeah. How much is the fine? How many birds does he have to sell in order to cover his fine and have it part of his costs? Or if you can apply some of the rules that we have even more creatively, can he sell live chickens to his customers that don't want live chickens, they want butchered chickens, and offer the butchering for free? And that's a lot of times what they did. Like Rodney's got some really expensive Ziploc bags back there, I bet. So just to be creative in how you think about what your constraints are, and know that like if it's government in particular, and no, I'm not saying health, right? Like Joel Salatin is selling healthy birds that his customers want, but if the constraint is government, that there are creative ways to approach that. So I'm gonna go back to that skills slide, and because I didn't talk a lot about skills, and I'm sure some discussion about skills are gonna come up, I kind of just highlighted this slide, like the things that I've done in some way, at least enough to like be like, oh yeah, I've done that to you guys. And yellow are things I've like kind of dabbled in, like I certainly wouldn't recommend my skills to someone else, but I know enough to get myself in trouble. Things that I know I'm never gonna get into. I'm never gonna repair engines. I have no interest, and the amount of time to get into it too significant. And then things I'm excited to do, gathering resources to get started doing, but really couldn't say I'm any use at yet. So from there, we're ready for questions whenever.
Fantastic talk, and I know you talked about this a little bit, but kind of talk about like kind of your personal like why, like hey, I wanted to do this, and what was the first thing that you tried when you decided to do it?
I almost think it might be hard to like go back and because you kind of like are into it, and you look up and you realize you were there, but I would say like the thing that gave me the confidence to just get started is I was raised horseback riding. And so I was like the kid at the barn that my trainer would like leave for a week, and I was like 16 in high school, and I had my license, and I'd feed like the 30-horse stable, and then go to school, come back, do turnout, like that's something that I think as a young person like gave me I would put it beyond confidence maybe to ego, to just be like, I don't know, I probably won't fail at this, I'll be fine. But a little bit more like I would say gardening was like my red pill into homesteading for sure, and that started with like a window box in our apartment, like on the balcony, and I got one tomato, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And so that was kind of my start.
Hey, wait, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, there. No, I can hear.
You're good.
So I don't know if this is more in the weeds question, but
I love
you have
weeds.
chickens. I've been thinking about getting some chickens, but I'm concerned that they're gonna get eaten by other animals.
your goals and what your constraints are. Just like start, like, why do you want chickens? And you know, what's your situation like? How much land do you have? And so, because there's a lot of solutions that you can implement. A solution that we're seeing like gain popularity even on smaller homesteads is something called a chicken tractor. So people who really want chickens like out free ranging on their land. But I have hawks. Like I've had hawks swoop down on my chickens on a number of occasions. I haven't lost one to a predator yet, but I also like probably don't get them out of. They have a very large like coop and run, and but I would love for them to be in my garden more. And what I did was I went and got like a dog pen, so I can like herd them all into the pen. I can move that around, and that's like a poor man's chicken tractor. But in larger spaces, flatter spaces, you can literally like have like a big temporary structure that you're dragging around your yard, so that they have a little bit more ability to free range on your property, but in a safer environment. You'll see like other things if you know hawks are your main concern as well. You know, have you seen like those big Stanleys, like the big like air, it's like a big like promo like air balloon thing, and he's like dancing, and so people will use those in their backyards because they'll scare off hawks. Shiny things like having like weird reflective things in your backyard can help scare off hawks. If you have digging predators, like making sure that dawn and dusk your chickens are safe. That's when those predators are going to be out more, and making sure their coop is absolutely predator proof, hardware wire everywhere, and if it's bears, that there's electric fencing around that. So lots of solutions, but again, goals and constraints, right?
For somebody who lives in an apartment or a very small indoor space, what are some of the first steps that they could take to start becoming more self-sufficient?
So something I wish I did when I was in a smaller space, I really wished I was going to farmers markets more often at the end of the season, grabbing a whole bunch of food and practicing things like canning and food preservation in my home with other people's produce. You'll see like canning up here is in my like yellow, like I've dabbled, I like can water bath some stuff, and then I've got a pressure canner that I'm still a little intimidated by. And part of the reason for that is because my produce, like the stuff that I grew, that is scarce. That is gone long before it meets a canner. And so going and gaining that kind of confidence and learning those skills when it doesn't feel as dear can be really valuable. And then, I mean, if you want to be growing your own food, like having a grow tent, you know, it's interesting. I don't think that we acknowledge how beneficial illegal marijuana was for all of us in a lot of ways. Like, it was a bad thing, but it had some really cool side effects, and that like there's some amazing technology around indoor grows. And so like if you are interested in growing stuff, if you love like a homegrown tomato, you can grow that in your apartment with a little bit of space. And we're not talking a lot of space, we're talking a closet. So those are the areas that I have more interested in, but other things, go hunting. Like that's like absolutely something that you can do to increase like your ability to not rely on grocery store calories. So it's a few ideas.
So one of the things I know that you've been doing lately is the sewing and mending your own clothes. And I think that when I think of someone that's homesteading and making clothing, it's like itchy, it's like a potato sack, it's like a quilt or something, you know, and I think yours is very stylish. And so I was just wondering if you could go more into that, since you haven't touched on it, why you pick the fibers that you do, and, you know, why is it,
You're gonna put me on my polyester soapbox.
well, why is it homesteading? I guess, like, you know, you're just making cool, fashionable clothes, but like, why would you put it in this box?
Yeah, so I think this is definitely one of the areas. So like I ain't even like put it into my homesteading box until I was a little bit deeper into doing it. The last several years, I think that the studies showing how damaging polyester is have been absolutely damning. Like, guys, if you're wearing polyester underwear and you want to have children someday or maintain your testosterone levels, you should toss that shit, because you are fucking up your world. And so, and I got studies, I'll post the studies. I have, you know, disruptors. So
All
yeah.
candles?
Huh?
All candles?
Most candles. I have a couple candles that are like stupid expensive just because I like get my kicks off lighting shit on fire at home, I guess. But
Pyrotechnics.
Well, it's like fragrance.
yeah, but a lot of those like soy-based candles are terrible for you, and yet that's what most of them are these days. Like if you're using something like coconut, like that's a little better, and like essential oil-based candles are a little better. But a lot of those things, like we're not really meant to be like inside inhaling this stuff. We're not meant to have like all of these like plastics on our skin. So to actually answer your question, I was really frustrated by like both fast fashion and how ugly a lot of natural fiber clothing is. Like I don't know how else to put that. Like it's you find like nice organic stuff and I'm like, and I look like a potato sack. And I don't want to look like a potato sack. I want a healthy marriage instead. So and so I kind of like got into I think this is one of those areas where like sometimes I don't think too much about it. I'm just like, I can do that. I saw it in the store, I can do that. And then you spend thousands of dollars on fabrics, not that much, Josh, I promise.
That's right, it's all crypto.
And hundreds of hours like trying to acquire new skills, and you end up being like, hey, I made this one skirt, it's cool. And so that's kind of like how it ended up kind of tying in, and doing it a little bit more budget friendly maybe if I don't value my time at all, which when it comes to skill acquisition, like Danielle, you know this about me, a lot of you guys know this about me, like I like to like start a thing, learn the thing, then don't go back to it a lot of times, and I love learning new skills and then abandoning them almost as much. And so if you're someone like that, like here's a really fun list. And so that's definitely been it, but I'm not abandoning sewing, it's way too much fun. Danielle, you can give away the mic now.
So I don't know how to do anything on this list. And I can go out and search the internet for soil preparation and I'll find 5,000 links. Perhaps you just answered my question. My question is going to be, do you have trusted resources to go to that can help us at least start? I mean, soil preparation is probably the start of growing. I'll stop there asking because you've answered.
I mean, but I would also say like failing's kind of fun. Like maybe you.
Expensive though too.
No, it doesn't have to be. Like I get it, and you have to pick the things that you're just willing to fail at. But I do think there's value to like planning and thinking and doing all these things, and I do that. I definitely do that. Canning, like there's high risk, right? Like what if I get botulism? That would be bad. But sometimes when it comes to like seeds, like I brought seeds to share, because I'm obsessed with seed sharing. And so like maybe it's literally like taking something that is about to go bad that's in your refrigerator and like sticking it in soil and just seeing what happens. Like it can be all those things. I definitely have like resources that I love. I mentioned Joel Salatin, and he's not as active on the scene now, but he's written some really interesting, like thought-provoking books, especially if you want to be mad at your local government. I actually, the book here at the top in the center, it's called Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal.
Yes.
And
What a great book.
it took me years to read it, you guys, because every single time I picked it up, I get so pissed off. I'm like, I can't look at this again. But there's, I would say start small. It's really the biggest thing. Like nourishing broth, nourishing traditions. Like maybe you just start with bone broth. Like for the next month, anytime you eat meat that has a bone, throw the bone in the freezer at the end of it instead of throwing it in the trash. At the end of that month, Google a broth recipe, put it all in boiling water, combine it, see how it turns out, see what you like, see what you don't like. And so starting small, picking like one of those things, you're like, oh man, that looks cool. I wouldn't mind failing at that a few times. Pick it, find a book, reach out on the Libertarian the Rocks Telegram channel, reach out on Twitter. Like, Sadie said that she would love to be a resource. Like, I'm sure she has some fun things we can all enjoy failing at. And succeeding. There's a lot of success too, but I just want to emphasize that there's also like a resilience to like learning to fail at things in a way that isn't crushing. on homesteading subjects, but it's a lot of them.
I don't have the microphone anymore, but of these
Right,
books,
person.
at the absolute beginning, besides the bone broth, what would you recommend?
What's your
What's
your goal?
I want to build a garden bed.
A garden bed?
Yep.
Okay. So I would pick projects for small gardens, and it's literally a couple how-tos. And then I would pick grow all you can eat in 3 square feet.
I've got a couple of those magazines.
Yeah, and a couple of cities magazines. All right, we got on there?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm just adding to my rereads. Projects for small gardens and.
All you can eat in 3 square feet.
Got
JD,
it.
I gotcha.
Thank you.
That sounds like a cool book too. I get that one. Do you ever think about like what's your biggest blind spot? Because the goal is independence, right? So, what's the thing that you consume the most that you need to replace? What's the most urgent thing? Like, do you think that way, or do you just pick a skill off the list and be like, oh, that sounds cool?
I mean, I definitely think of like the areas that were most vulnerable. So something that I did share is Josh and I actually went back and forth on buying chickens for years. I know Luna's our anarchist chicken. She's the coolest. I swear. But we went back and forth for a long time. And part of it is like you can get really great quality eggs now, guys. Like in the grocery store, you can get great quality eggs, and they're way cheaper. If you're complaining about spending $7 for a dozen eggs, like chances are you're gonna spend more unless you're very thoughtful in how you raise your backyard chickens. Like you can do it way cheaper. I'm not saying you can't. You absolutely can. But if you want to do easy backyard chickens, you're gonna spend more. And also have them be like soy free, like Josh and I do. But what happened was COVID. Like COVID happened, and we realized like we didn't have the food resilience. Even with my garden, we didn't have the food resilience that we really like talked about and wanted to have, and we could just go do it. And we knew we were going to be like home for a couple months for the most part to raise chicks inside, and so we just did it. So I would say like I don't think that there will ever be a time in my life, even if I could dedicate all of my money, all of my energy to it, I don't think I can ever be completely self-sufficient. That's not my goal. My goal is to move the needle in that direction. And when I can't do it myself, to have people in my community who can. I'm not gonna repair an engine. Chances are like we will need an engine repaired at some point in our lives, even if we live out in the boonies. I need that in my community. I know that that's a blind spot, and it's not a blind spot. I'm not gonna fill that. I'm not gonna lighten that area. And so, what is the saying, like letting the perfect be the enemy of the good?
Oh yeah.
And if I was gonna focus on all the barriers that I have to being like totally self-sufficient, that would just suck. Like, it's not motivating to me. Instead, I'm gonna be like kind of gung-ho, happy-go-lucky, and be like, oh, I could do that.
Did you get the chickens in the mail?
Our first flock, we did not. We went and got at Murdoch's, like Josh in the car, like me in a mask, and chickens were chicks were so scarce that I had like my breeds all picked out. Like these would be best in my garden, and all that stuff. None of the breeds I wanted originally, and it was just like whatever I could get because that's what that was like. We have a second flock now that's combined with the first, but they were born later, and those we got in the mail, and fuck the U.S. government.
Fuck the U.S. government.
Like the post office killed one of my baby chicks.
Fuck that. Let's go get 'em.
Like understand that like you can do those things. I don't think I could do it again.
Another fun thing is you can get bees in the mail too.
Okay. Outside
Rodney's
of
next.
All right. Outside of Josh and Luna and the crew, what is your favorite thing that you're cultivating right now?
Well,
You're not okay for Rodney. Go ahead and think about it.
I'm gonna give you a cheesy answer, at least to start. Like just creativity in general. Like one of the things that I think the thing that gardening like really like scratches the itch for me more than anything is being able to apply creative solutions and like think outside the box. So that's like, you know, the broad cheesy
Okay, Eric
answer.
Voorhees, could you kind of narrow that shit down for me a little bit?
Okay, so I mean, I can tell you like this year, like I grew potatoes for the first time. We
There we
hadn't had
go.
potatoes in the past. I could have filled my bathtub with potatoes at times. Like that was really fun.
All right.
So that was like my favorite like addition this year. I also learned some new ways to eat my chives and preserve them. Like I love the chive blossoms. Like you really can't find them in the store. And they're like these big purple like oniony pops of goodness. And I'll have to bring some in next season now. But those are some of my favorite things coming out of the garden. And
Did you make vodka with that bathtub potatoes?
We drink so little booze that this year I was like, what do I do with all this? And I made vanilla extract instead. All right, who's next? Kirsten?
No.
Oh.
That was a joke about what I get the boost here.
No, it's not good for your liver, guys. All right, where's the next question?
So you said fuck the government, and I believe you actually believed in that. But
And not consensually, I don't mean it that way.
okay. But maybe what you have to do, it was government said you fuck you because they destroyed market so much. So mass production, which farmers actually can do, which is significantly more beneficial for production than homesteading. And you right now you use homesteading instead of using very profitable markets. So because yes, I have seen that when Soviet Union collapsed, my parents started to do homesteading. And yes, they had significantly less space than you. You had 24% of acres, and they got just 7% of acre. And yeah, but it requires so much time, so much effort. It could be beneficial when it's hobby, when you consider it as your fun experience. Yes, then it's okay. Well, not okay, it's hobby. It's always good for yourself. But if you consider it as a way how to live, I would say it's sign of that civilization is
I'm really
actually
glad
destroyed.
that there's farmers in this world. Like,
Yes.
let me not like I don't know that I believe that homesteading truly competes with those other markets. The U.S. government thinks it does, kind of actually, as we saw in like World War II and a bunch of constitutional law cases, all that stuff. But I agree with you that like being totally self-sufficient, growing everything that you're going to eat on your home is one really limiting. Like I would never be able to eat a banana again, and I like bananas. But also
Well,
like
they come with dwarf bananas.
I also know it's the climate. I also know like I don't think that we'll ever raise cattle even if we have 10 acres. Partially because I am for some reason terrified of cows. I've been charged by cows like on horseback and like cliffside and not fun. And we eat like most of our meat consumption is beef. Like I'm so
Pick what it
glad
is.
like Jason Rick, Rich Ranches, like I'm so glad that he exists, that he can get meat that aligns with like my values and all that stuff. So I'm not saying that markets aren't important, that farmers shouldn't be growing food, that we should all be doing this for ourselves. What I am saying though is that there are trade-offs, right? That you gain efficiency by relying on those farmers and those markets, but you lose some resilience. And so by having the experience of homesteading, knowing that I can, that we can honestly, like if we had to, probably survive off of eggs from 10 chickens, like, and live at least. Like that is resilience, that is valuable, and that, you talk about Soviet Russia and how your parents had to homestead for their sustenance because the markets collapsed. It wasn't their fault the markets collapsed, and I bet they were damn glad that they had some homesteading skills to fall back on. So I think it's an important knowledge, like traditional knowledge, generational knowledge that we have lost in the last several decades in particular. we never need, like, hopefully no one in this room is ever calling being like, I can't get eggs, so I was just wondering if maybe I could trade you 1 Bitcoin for 6 eggs. It would be, I would love for that never to happen. I hope we always have markets, I hope we always have those things, but I'm providing resilience for my family by learning skills and not relying on someone else to do it all the time. So.
2 more questions.
It's more of a comment. First, this was great, Kiara. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's just because you like me.
And we do. We love you, Kiara.
Well, and the topic was very pertinent to me this year. I attended a conference called the Exit and Build Summit in Texas this past May, and there was a lot about homesteading and living off the grid, and so it was a wonderful thing. And this topic then brought me to the point where I decided, okay, after 20 plus years of living in a concrete cube in central Denver, I opted to get a Denver urban garden plot that's available to any Denver City County resident. And it was an amazing experience. People say, oh, gardening can be so hard. Well, it is if you want to work it, but what the real joy and benefit is, just add a little water, Mother Nature and sunshine does an awful lot of the work, and it is amazing the fruit of your harvest that you can get. I gave away most of the stuff because I hadn't progressed to canning and some of these other things. But I'm just saying that it's a wonderful thing to partake and just go try it, as Kiara said. You'll learn new skills and you'll meet new people, especially in that environment of, like, if you use a Denver urban garden plot, since I have no green space where I live.
Yeah, community gardens are a great resource. So yeah, I would highly recommend that. If you don't have enough land, I've definitely thought on more than one occasion, like, maybe my neighbor would let me put a raised bed on his land. But then I'd have to talk to him, so I always
You gotta learn how to stack it.
vertical gardening. I've got like big cow panel trellises now.
One of the early slides, you had a clip about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeds, everyone.
I hope you like them like I enjoyed them. Up until recently. In one of your early slides, you had something, just a comment about cultivate, if I'm remembering right, cultivate seasonality.
Yes.
And I want to know, did you actually literally mean the seasons, or something a little expanded beyond that into the brain? What, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. Nice catch. This is definitely something I am leaning into. I think both in my life as a human living in a place where there are seasons, and also like as a woman who has like seasonality in my own month, for example, and just like embrace the fact that like we have this wonderful season of spring, of like emergence and new life and all these things, and then summer of like hyper growth, and then the end of summer of like production and produce, and then fall of that slowing of things, that cooling of our world, and then like the hibernation of winter. And so I am someone who I notice very much like how important the cycles of like high effort, low effort can be. I can't be at 100 all the time. I can be at 100 for, a few weeks of the summer, getting tomatoes out. But in order for me to be productive in my high summer, I need like the rest and the reset in the winter. And that's what I mean by cultivating seasonality in my own life, is like having those periods of not being social, of being social, of reflection and new emergence and like re-emergence out into the world and amongst people. And so that's something that I notice my need for, and I think in our society we just kind of have like a go until we can't anymore, shut down because we've done too much, and then wake up and try to do it all again. And I'm really trying to break that cycle in my own life.
It was a nice insert. That was a nice insert
Oh,
onto that page.
Yeah.
thank you.
That's our talk. Give it up for Kiara.